Hello and welcome to the Ultrawizard Ramble podcast. This is episode number 6, and today I'm going to have a chance to chat with my friend Philip Brown, who owns PERC Coffee. Philip's been a central role in our community here in Savannah for a long time. He's been a coffee provider, roaster. He's been a pop punk drummer. Today you're going to have a chance to hear all about him. I can't wait for you to hear more about his business, PERC Coffee, and the impact they've had on our community. So I hope you enjoy our conversation. Hey, Philip, welcome to the podcast, man. I'm really looking forward to having you on today and hearing all about PERC.
Yes, happy to be here.
Awesome stuff, man. So me and you got to know each other way back, I guess, in 2010 or 11 when you were posted up really close to my house. But when you first started PERC, when you were working with maybe a 2 kilogram roaster, 4 kilogram roaster, something kind of small, man. So
Yeah. It was
it,
a definitely the beginning was sort of humble, but that's awesome. I'm really happy for how it went.
yeah, and now I'm stoked to see your coffee all over the country in different Whole Foods throughout our region. So today, just for our listeners here at the Ultra Wizard Ramble podcast, we're looking forward to hearing more about PERC, more about you, and starting first and foremost with just your origin story, man, of who you are, how you became interested in coffee, how you got to Savannah. So I'd love to hear a little bit of background on you.
Yeah, this is a subject I'm an expert on. Yeah, so I was a drummer in a band and moved to Athens, Georgia, where the rest of my bandmates were. I met my bandmates actually at college, and then they all moved to, or two of them were in Athens, so the rest of us moved to Athens to sort of play music regularly and tour. And while I wasn't touring, I needed a job, and I tried different jobs I thought I would really enjoy. First job was at a video store that we used to have back in the day, where I was
Ooh,
into
very cool.
movies and music at the time. Those were my two things that I liked a lot. And so I got a job at the movie store thinking, well, that's something I like. But it turns out I didn't like it that much. It wasn't terrible, but it was just slow and kind of, they asked me to call people who hadn't returned their videos and tell them they had late fees. So kind of a boring job. And then I got a job at a record store in Athens, Wuck Street, a cool place. And that was also, I thought it would be cool, but it really, and the record store is really great, but I just didn't like sitting around waiting for folks to come in and watching them look at records and then kind of doing busy work.
Sure, sure.
And it wasn't too long after where I spoke with Keith Quartermeyer, who owned who owned Jittery Joe's at the time, and he was a fellow musician. And I had popped into one of their new shops that was in an old church, and they had like renovated it, and I just
Oh,
thought it was
rad
awesome,
shop.
and asked for a job. And one of the things that was really cool is our roaster actually roasted inside the church as well. So he liked to work odd
Whoa.
hours, and I was opening up the shop, and he was roasting. And so I got to ask him a lot of questions, and initially like really enjoyed the aspect of just serving customers and doing a great job and trying to interact with folks. And then one day, I think where I really caught the bug was we had this coffee from Cameroon, and I really liked it. And I asked Charlie, we hadn't had it in a while, and I asked Charlie, our roaster, I said, why haven't we been getting the coffee from Cameroon? And he started talking about political unrest. And it was kind of the first time I really thought about where coffee came from. And he was like, you know what, let me give you this book. And he gave me this book, this big book about where coffee's come from and the countries that they come from, what the things they export, and whether or not coffee was in the top 3 exports, and all different kinds of information on where
Super
coffee came from.
interesting.
And that was it. I was kind of hooked. That was a long answer. Sorry, I'm not good at short
No,
answers.
it's good, man. So at that point, you're going down the rabbit hole of becoming interested in everything about coffee, from the implications of political unrest in different countries and whether or not you can source it at the time, to, I imagine, starting to get into a little bit of roasting on your own, or at least to becoming curious about roasting, like with
Right.
Jittery Joe's. So not an ideal job, watching movies all day and
Yeah.
hassling people, to return their product. Not an ideal job waiting on people to buy records. And even if you do get a chance to play records at work, but coffee like sparks your interest here. So at this point, it's like drumming and coffee, man. a little bit of
And
a step backward here. When you were drumming from what I remember in punk, like pop punk bands. Is that kind of what you were doing in Athens? Was that
yeah,
the primary avenue and the outlet?
yeah, the first band, Joe Christmas, I would think I guess you could categorize it as a pop punk band. It depends on which songs you're listening to. Our first record was more pop punk, and our second record was maybe a little slower. But yeah, it was a blast, and got to play a bunch. You know, this is when we were 18 and young, and got to tour a bunch, and then after getting a job at the coffee shop, I got to try coffees in every state and try coffee shops and try to see what they were doing with coffee. So it was a really cool way to, like, every morning you want to start your day with coffee, especially on tour. It's like kind of the first thing you're like, where do we get coffee? So
Totally,
yeah, I
man.
got to try coffee in all the places I went and meet folks that were doing it, and so that was really cool, and also just kind of get to compare it to what Jittery Joe's and what we were doing at our shop. So
Yeah, that's when I first got into coffee too, man. When I was touring in the bands and having just a French press and just an AeroPress in the car, but you get to sample all of these cool coffees from around the country, right? And maybe you have your own hand grinder, get to do it upright on the tailgate of the vehicle, and like what fun times, adventuring around the
nice.
country and experiencing different coffees. So at Jittery Joe's, how much of a chance did you get to try your hand at roasting coffee? Was that your origin there, or were you roasting at home? Like, what kind of opportunities did you have with Jittery Joe's before you took the leap to do your own thing?
Yeah, so I started off as just a barista, and honestly loved, like, immediately loved how fast paced it was, and just that you had like a big line of customers, and next thing you knew, you look up and it's time to go. So I realized I like I like to be fast paced. I don't like, what am I going to do next, or clean the walls. I like a job where you're really busy. And then my second favorite job was washing dishes for the same reason. But yeah, and then as you're that what happens with the coffee shop is, as you're around longer and longer, they're like, I guess I'll make you manager. And so I became manager, and then after managing for several years, I really kind of was thinking about what I was going to do, and really thinking about maybe I didn't want to be a manager of a coffee shop anymore. And my wife really was the one that was like, why don't you go down and talk to Charlie about learning how to roast? And I was like, that's a great idea. So it was really kind of her idea more than it was mine. But immediately I was like, oh, that's brilliant. And so I immediately asked Charlie if I could come learn how to roast with him, and he said that if I was willing to open up a small tasting room inside the roastery, that I could that he would teach me how to roast. And I was like, deal. And so I was able to do that, and so this way, people that came in, I could talk with them, and he, while he was trying to roast, so that he didn't get distracted. And then also he gave me a little, like, popcorn popper that I sat on the counter, and I would just roast batches and batches of the same coffee over again, different ways. And then he would come taste them with me and talk with me about, what the results were and why they tasted the way they did. And then eventually he started drawing out curves on a blackboard, and then he was really great. He was just like, all right, come over here and grab the controls of the roaster. And then he just walked away. And I was like, where did he go? And he just left, and I was like
Yeah, man.
roasting, and it was like scary, but also immediately, like, I knew it was like the thing I wanted to do forever. So it was really, really neat.
Yeah, so I guess responsibilities change a lot, right? Like, you know what you like in coffee, but then you're like, how do I duplicate that, or how do I make it my own? I'm sure that was a fascinating part of roasting. Whereas it's in a way, it's kind of like the difference between coaching and running fast. When a coach is providing workouts for you, you don't if you don't want to become a coach, you don't really think that much about the workouts. You just say, well, like, I got really fast this season, right? I'm not sure entirely how, but my coach had a vision and provided it for me. So did it change your entire perception of coffee, roasting it and working with the product and being able to touch the beans and see, I overcooked it here, right? Like, like I went too far, or I went too high in temperature. Like, what do you remember learning in those early stages, I guess, that have affected you so much with developing such a great business?
Yeah, I think what the initial aspect was is really kind of seeing what a coffee might do, like, from season to season or from roast to roast, and maybe not be as blanket, like, do I like it or not. It became more like, what is interesting about this one or different about this one, and being able to appreciate, like, what those differences were, and rather than just, like, being like nothing wrong with consuming, but like kind of when you consume something, you're like, do I like it or do I not like it? It's kind of a more of like just a black and white type of thing.
Yeah,
And
totally.
I think I probably am not like that as much now. I'm more like, uh, what is different about this one, or if I'm tasting something and I taste something that I don't like, what would I do to change it? You know what I mean? Like if it's not sweet enough, how would
Yeah,
I add
totally.
sweetness? Or if it's too bright, how would I tame that? Or if it's too bitter, how would I pull back on some of that? So those kind of things, that just more of like that kind of more holistic thinking, I think. And I think that way a little bit when I consume other products now. Or even I remember there's this one time where I was like trying to get better at being okay with just saying what flavors that I taste. And so I was riding my bike home in Savannah, and Savannah summers, and you're riding your bike like
Oh yeah.
or
Right
running,
now.
like there are some very interesting smells that hit you from on garbage day. And I remember like trying to pick out bad smells that I'm smelling, like I'm like, oh, that's diapers. And
Yeah,
just
definitely.
random, like trying to like think to myself of how to develop my just confidence to be able to like get in touch with the things that I'm smelling or tasting, or and be okay with saying things and not being worried about being wrong. Those are the things.
Yeah.
It becomes a little bit hard, especially when you're at a cupping table or you're tasting coffees, to like be the first one to throw out your opinion, because it's always like you don't want to be the one person who's like, I like this one, and everybody's like, I don't. So it's
Right, right,
kind
right,
of
right.
yeah. It actually happened to me the other day, which was really funny, that we were tasting coffees, and I really liked one, and no one else liked that one as much as I liked that one. And you're not, there's not really a right or wrong. I think that's one thing too, that it took me a little bit to get an understanding of, is that like like when you're developing what you want to do, you're coming, it's very similar to music, like, right, you figure out what is it that
Sure.
I like, and then you present it, and hopefully other people dig it, right? So it's very
Y-
similar. So
Yeah, I get that. And describing smells in Savannah, right? Low tide, the paper mill,
right,
diapers.
that's
Like, I
right.
don't know, it's hot and it smells awful, man. I can't
Yeah.
put my finger on it right now, but I'm going to think about it tonight.
Yeah,
Like
it's
what
usually
could that
not good
possibly be?
smells, unfortunately.
Yeah, but hey, like we grow to like certain things, right? And we grow to like certain tastes and smells, and some of them are literally rotting, right? Like
Right,
humans have consumed things like rotting cheese for forever, right?
right.
And we develop very strange interests when it comes to smell and taste. And I think
Sure.
that
And
like
fermentation is in coffee, it's in beer, it's in so many different things. It's more about how you control those things.
yeah, so you have it pretty dialed now. All right, so how do we get from here, like Jittery Joe's, Athens, to Savannah? Because this is kind of when we met, or I
Yeah.
assume you were here maybe just a couple years before. Like, when what age were you when you were finally starting to roast, and then when you moved to Savannah, what year was that in? And
Yeah.
when did you start PERC? Because I can remember back to you being the guy on the single speed bike that was trying to find a way to get all the coffee delivered, and
Right.
we were in early talks about, can we put them on a pedicab? Can we put coffee bags on a pedicab, when you were still hand stamping bags? So
That's right.
yeah, like how did you get to that point, and how did you score the spot on DeSoto Row for PERC's HQ, the initial HQ?
Yeah, that's an interesting story. So I was in Athens, still working at Didgery Joe's, and was going kind of like one time on a tour, I think out west. I had coffee that I was like, I had an Ethiopia, washed Ethiopia, I think it was, and it was like very different from the way we roast coffee at Joe's. And it had these lemony flavors and sort of fruity flavors, and I really was curious about how they did that. And it was obvious that it was a lighter roast, but there was more nuance than that. And when I got back to Joe's, I really wanted to try to figure out how I could bring some of that to what we did. And in
Sure.
talking with Charlie and the folks at Joe's, they had a really big customer base that absolutely loved what they were putting out. and they really weren't all that interested in like going on a journey to find some new roast level and get other things out of coffee. At least not in the same way I was, right? Not on the same timeline. Like I was ready to
Interesting.
go.
Okay.
And like I guess probably I think it probably came down to my wife again. I was speaking with my wife in the evening about like all these flavors that I thought I could get out of the coffee and this approach I wanted to take. And she was like, well, why don't you start your own thing? And I was like, oh yeah, I guess I could do that.
Why
And
not?
so I went to
Yeah.
the SBA, and I took a how to write a business plan course, and was had a lot of really helpful people. And then we looked at a bunch of places of potential places to start PERC, and Savannah I just immediately thought was awesome. Like it was came down to really Charleston or Savannah, and like I love Charleston, but I really love Savannah. Like I really love how
Yeah.
much soul it has and how sort of relaxed it's like Charleston's like I don't know, more relaxed, chill like cousin or something like that. And I really like that aspect of it. And also like there was a lot of great food, and I thought if I could talk to the chefs and like convince them to maybe have better coffee at the end of a meal, I think I could get a couple clients and try to get rolling. And then yeah, initially I reached out and I found a place on Barnard Street. It was at the corner of 40th and Barnard. It's like a yoga, I think a Pilates studio now.
Oh
It's a
yeah. Yeah.
three-story building, and so I started out there, and I went to zoning to get started, and they're like, you can't roast in that building. It's not zoned correctly. And I was like,
Oh
oh great.
man.
I like my first mistake was a huge one, but I looked at crazily enough. I looked in Craigslist, and there was the 2424 DeSoto, and we literally put the roaster on like a pallet and took a pallet jack and like rolled it down 40th Street. And then we had a glass company take the glass front out of 2424 because I couldn't get the roaster in without taking the whole glass
Oh
front out.
man.
They
Wow.
stood there and waited while we figured out how to finagle the roaster inside and then put the glass back on, and then got up and running. And that's how I got. And Greg Jacobs, who owned DeSoto at the time, or the Starland at the time, was really awesome. And was the rent was really inexpensive. I think it was $400 a month at the
Oh man,
time,
that's
which
such
for
a
me
killer
was,
deal for that spot, man.
yeah. Well, I think he was like, it's 450 a month, and I was like, how about 400 and some coffee? And he was like, deal. And I was
Deal,
like,
man. Yeah,
yeah, and I
yeah.
was like, that's awesome. So I
Different
knew,
times, dude. Different times.
right, and I knew because of my experience going from management of Jittery Joe's to running the little shop at the roaster, I learned a lot about like rather than looking at like a top line income, understanding if I could keep all my costs low and I didn't really pay myself, I could give myself a chance to get up and running and do everything myself and kind of see if I can make this thing work. And so far so good.
And here we are. So you did it the right way. It sounds like you did some things with your business plan that maybe a lot of people haven't, right? Like I know I'm guilty of that, where I just kind of found myself in this career and pursued, right? But you really thought about it. You said, okay, well, like I want this to be successful. Like how do I keep the bottom line low? So you get up and rolling in Savannah. What are those early stages like when you're, looking around for clients? Like I can remember by the time we started hanging out a bit and I started stopping in here or there, you were like, I'm delivering to, I'm now providing for this company and this company and this company. And before we knew it, I think that I felt like I could get PERC on any corner when I was pedicabing, right? Because at the time I was a pedicabber,
Yeah,
and I rode for Rusty and Savannah
yeah, I remember
Pedicab, and
that.
that was good times. When Savannah was quite different than it is now. So, what were your initial client? What was your initial client base like? And I mean, I'm sure it was awesome to see that blossom and grow.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, firstly, I was lucky enough to have Forsyth Farmers Market let me sell there, which was, I think, a big thing. Was awesome. And then initially, like I said, I went around to all of the restaurants that used local produce and things like that. So I think it was Chabella at the time, and oh gosh, there's a bunch of places that probably aren't around anymore. But also, I got really lucky in that almost just after I started, I think Green Truck started and Butterhead's Greens started. And at the time, if you remember, Sammy Greens. So we
Oh
kind
yeah.
of all, strangely enough, popped up around the same time. And I think the reasoning was it was around 2010, if you remember, that was really kind of a little bit of a recession then. And I think what it was is I think that it was a bunch of folks who used to run shops for other people, managers or people that actually could do the thing. Josh was, ran a bakery, and then he ran Soho South, and then I forget whatever it was called at the time. And then he was also at Starling Cafe and the Josh from Green Truck. And then same thing with the guys from Butterhead Greens. They ran restaurants. And then we found ourselves kind of like where, the places, there were really low rents and we knew how to do a thing. And we didn't mind getting a little bit of a grimy space and kind of pulling up our sleeves and trying to make it happen. And so all of those places were really awesome. And all of those places, because they kind of popped up right when I did, also were like down to use the coffee. And so I was really lucky that we all kind of collectively came up. And then also in delivering those folks coffees, was able to hang out with Josh for a little while and listen to what he was going through and
Yeah.
and let him talk, because he's a smart dude. And then the guys at Butterhead also had different experiences, and listening to Patrick over there and listening to kind of his perspective and what he saw with his customers. It was just really great to help me learn and get to know the folks of Savannah and like kind of what all of those folks were seeing, and have someone I could call and talk to if I was like, oh gosh, I'm going through this, or this is trouble or whatever. I could call Josh or Patrick and ask them what's going on and see if they had any advice. So that was actually really, really cool.
Yeah, it's awesome. Like, the green truck is like such a staple of Savannah now. Josh is such a good guy, so is Whitney. And
Yeah.
yeah, to have seen like Butterhead succeed and Sammy Greens was just like such a staple of like if you worked in the transportation industry or if you worked in the hospitality industry, whatever you were doing service, like you were supporting these local businesses. And we're still fortunate, Starland, the district that we basically reside in. We're a little off the beaten path, right, Philip? I mean,
Yeah.
but we're tangential. The district is still so like local and awesome, and there are so many cool things going on. And we've seen a lot
Yeah.
of growth since then, right? Like,
Right.
I mean, I can remember a time when it was, just Foxy, and Jen stopping into the studio that I'd lived in. She was kind of like a frequent guest, and she said, I think I'm gonna do my own thing. I want to start this coffee shop. And we were like, have you worked in coffee? And she's like, no, but
No.
I have this vision, like I have this vision this shop could be successful and good. And I think that people in Savannah in general, like just come up and want to support each other, right? Like you show up to your friend's thing and you want
That's
to see
right.
your buddy that has a local business like survive, do well and flourish.
Yeah.
So you've been pretty tenacious about the growth of PERC, and we've had a relationship for a long time. We have the monthly group run at your shop, which we'll have next weekend.
That's
I
awesome.
think I think the cast will come out after that, but once a month we have the PERC group run now in Savannah. We've also got like a branch up at the Atlanta shops. So that's how much your company's grown. When did you decide the production at DeSoto just isn't where I want it to be? I need to start thinking about moving. Like I'm I'm not able to keep up because I can
Yeah.
remember. I think we got a vinyl disaster back here.
Oh no.
Stacks of wax, man.
Got it.
So when did you see that? You were in a spot where you needed to produce more. You needed a bigger roaster. You needed a bigger space.
Right. Yeah, I think our I think eventually we hired Spencer, and Spencer is awesome. He's in Chattanooga doing his own thing with coffee right now, and we still talk all the time. And then not too long after, I hired Taylor, who's still with us, who's awesome, and he does everything for PERC currently. But I think around that time when there was about three of us, and the space itself was, I don't know, 350, 400 square feet. It was so small. We were just bumping into each other constantly. And then the amount of coffee we had to keep, also, the green coffee was taking up a lot of room. It was really evident we needed more space. And I was concerned because we had folks that were ordering coffee weekly, and I didn't want to have any downtime. And simultaneously, I had been bugging Ramsey because I was doing all these brewing events, and I would like I would go to rock shows or things like that and brew coffee and try to meet folks. And one of those places was as it was at Ramsey's place, and
Mm.
so I was brewing there, and he walked me around. You know how he shows people around, and he showed
Oh
me
yeah.
around all of his awesome spaces with his tables and lumber and all the things that Ramsey has over there, and at Southern Pine. And he walked me into the space that's now PERC, and it was just like I think he was letting someone do like an art gallery, an art exhibit there, and it was just like kind of like if I closed my eyes and thought what would be a cool space for a roastery, I was like, oh my gosh, this is it. And but it's Ramsey, and he's super cool, but he's not really quick to like he's a little bit careful about who he works with and how he does things, and
Sure.
he's really like careful to curate his space. And so I was like, what do you think about us being in this space to do PERC? And then he was like, yeah, that sounds cool, and kind of didn't answer the question. I was like, let's
Interesting.
go over
Interesting.
here and meet this person. And then he disappeared off into, and then a couple months later, he just called me and said, are you ready to do it? And strangely at the same time, we understood that we were really needed larger capacity roaster, and it made a lot of sense if we're going to move to just install the new roaster at the new space while I was still roasting at the small space, and then as soon as the new roaster was up and running, then we could continue the rest of the move. And that's what we did. That way we had zero downtime, and we didn't let
Sure.
any of our
Sure.
customers because I had seen another roastery do a move once, and they had a lot of thoughts about how quickly they'd be able to open, and those were not the case. And then they couldn't roast coffee for, I don't know, a month or two. And
Yikes.
if you have coffee, people that need coffee every week, they have to go find it somewhere. So I didn't want that to happen.
Yeah, you didn't want to be in a situation that the move costs you clientele, that
Right.
you have
Yeah.
to sever relationships with some people because you just can't provide for them in that given moment. Um, okay, so this is a big move. Like, what size was the roaster? I think you still have it in there.
No, we
No.
finally
Okay.
sold the small
Okay.
roaster to a place outside, a company outside of Atlanta that's roasting, and it was sad to see it go. But we also we bought the initial roaster was a 12 kilo roaster, and then
Okay.
we bought a 25 kilo roaster, and then we had for a long time we had the 12 and the 25, and then
Yeah.
we not too recently sort of recently bought a 35 kilo roaster. When we bought the 35 kilo roaster, we sold the 12 kilo roaster because we really didn't have a lot of space. And now we had the 25 and the 12. So that was, but then actually now we're selling the 25, and we actually just bought a 15, which seems kind of crazy, but, there's sort of a method to the madness. So so now we have a 15 and a 35, and
Hmm.
that seems to be, at least until we need something bigger, a really great amount, because we can roast smaller batches to help for the really fancy coffees, but also when we want to try to make the coffees taste right, we have to roast a few batches to try to get it just right, and we want to limit how much coffee gets roasted that isn't perfect. So that's what the
Sure.
15
That
can
makes a
do
lot
for
of
us.
sense. That makes a
Yeah,
ton of
so
sense.
yeah, so that's kind of where we're at now, and we are currently in selling the 25 kilo roaster to a place in Massachusetts, I think. Hopefully that will go through, and it can live on and roast for those folks.
Yeah, cool. I mean, that's a part of the industry that I'm sure is quite common, like just upcycling in general, with maybe companies that don't survive or companies that are like, whoa, we're blowing up. We need to upgrade as soon as possible, right? And
Right.
maybe you keep that smaller one and you have a bigger one too. So
Yeah.
now Perk is like a huge production. Tell me a little bit about the growth and what that was like. I got to see it, from a small shop up front in the roastery and expanding once labor ready was done with that space next to you. Remind me, is the structure like, does Perk now own that structure?
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah.
okay? So that half of the lot is all yours. I mean, this is like a huge upgrade in your functionality as a business. You now have like many offices as well off of, the roastery, the main shop where it's packed all the time now. We have the group
Yeah.
run there. next door you've got, your whole team, huge creative team, expanding back into, I assume, like sampling, testing coffees, and your office for private space. Your office is nice and quiet for the PERC cast. What was that like, man? I mean, just getting that next sector of the space open to you. I mean, that had to have been just huge in terms of functionality and change.
Yeah, it was awesome and a little bit scary because we decided to do that expansion right before a little something called COVID came.
Yeah, man. I
so
would imagine.
so that was a little bit of a stressor in that we were like, okay, we're going to allocate all this square footage to a retail shop because the shop's been going really well, and then COVID hit and the retail stuff kind of died down pretty good. But it gave us some time to, I think, get it right. And to be honest with you, my kids are coming home, so be careful.
It's
There
all
may
good.
be some
No,
random voices,
no worries.
but the uh, the so it gave us some time to kind of figure out how to do it right and get it set up. So it's really nice to have. We were again busting at the seams a little bit to that's Levon.
It's totally fun.
We were busting at the seams again with the space when we did expand. And so having the extra space was really great. And especially during COVID, because the grocery business and the web business blew up. So whereas
Oh,
the retail
sure,
business
sure.
kind of waned a lot, the all of a sudden the grocery business doubled, and then the web store business doubled. So we really needed a way to try to figure out how to get all those bags and all the packing and all that, like immediately needed more space. So we ended up having that space, which actually worked out really well. And then we were able to kind of come up with a plan to turn it into a shop as things started to kind of get a little bit more manageable with COVID. So that worked out actually pretty well. So we were also building out our first shop in Atlanta simultaneously, which luckily we were able to pivot a little bit and add a walk-up window. And
Yeah, yeah.
so we got kind of lucky because we were like right in the middle of that, and so the walk-up window was really helpful and able so we could serve folks without necessarily letting them in for a while. So yeah, it's been
Yeah.
a wild ride.
Yeah, man, this last like 3 years, it's funny, like it's been a wild ride, but you think back, is 3 years gone? I remember just being sort of like at the house for a long time, and you know,
Yeah,
18 months later, you're like, wow, year and a half of my life basically like spent at the house here. So really cool that, and I think I saw the same kind of growth in my coaching too. It was interesting times where services that were on the web were all of a sudden really important to people,
right,
and you become, whether, no matter what field you're in, you become a little bit of a therapist as well as a coach. You wear a lot of hats during a time where there's not an outlet for people to get active, right? So in my industry, we saw so much growth in that way too, where all of a sudden people have more time, or at least more time at home where they're not in transit, and they need more
right,
accountability.
yeah,
And
right,
that was kind of the main thing that I saw in terms of growth with my business, was like the accountability became really important for a ton of people. Um,
yeah.
so retail's blowing up. Yeah, we're getting now, to modern times with PERC. How much growth had you seen up to that point? And I know that like a lot of our talks were, wow, we're in a lot of Whole Foods now. How many Whole Foods are you in now? Like, what is the furthest your coffee is
Oof.
provided in that way?
Yeah, I think we're in out to Jackson, Mississippi, out that sort of area, and then up through North Carolina, Tennessee, North Carolina, and South Carolina. We don't go into Virginia quite yet. That is a different region for them. So we're hopeful at some point we'll be able to expand into Virginia and Kentucky and that area. But so far things are really good. And there's kind of, the way I look at it, there's kind of a couple ways we can expand to more stores, or we could try to sell more coffee to this in the stores we're already at. So that's kind of to some extent, I'm kind of okay with keeping it a little bit smaller as far as where we're at, and then trying to do a better job with the accounts that we already have. Trying to, because I'm always trying to think about like how yes, my customers are the place that potentially sell the coffee, but I think a lot about their customers and kind of what would they want and how to make sure, if possible, that folks, if they buy the coffee, how we can support that they understand how to brew it, or have the support via our website or other ways to try to make sure that they have a good experience. And then if it's a restaurant or a coffee shop, how can we help them deliver great coffee to their customers? So we try to spend a lot of time thinking about that, and it's it's really like, I think it really boils down to all of the success has been about people, whether it's the people who work for PERC or the people that support PERC or the people who have other businesses that buy and use PERC, and or the customers that come into their businesses. So the coffee is great, and I think we do a really great job of sourcing and roasting the coffee. But I also know a lot of other roasters, I think, that do an amazing job too. So I think when it comes down to it, a lot of it is, we try to be cool and try to work with cool people and just try to keep rolling with that, and understanding that our coffee is good, but other people have good coffee. So what are those things that make us sort of stand out? How can we help in other ways to make us the coffee that folks would want to drink or want to use, whether that be anything from what the packaging looks like, or how we help
Yeah, for
via the
sure.
website for folks to brew a better cup, or doing cool podcasts with cool folks like yourself. So whatever we can do to try to get the word out, and make it more about like people than a little bit more about like a business or a brand or something like that, even though obviously we are doing that as well.
Yeah, it's evident too, like I think when I think of PERC, I think, well, good coffee, good people, right? And that's like a big thing that you all stand by. You're now supporting athletes like myself. You're supporting cyclists like all over the region. It's cool to see your team grow in that way of like you support elite athletes. You have people that are involved, whether they're influencers. It's been huge growth for you, and it's been really cool to see it from just right down the road. Um,
That's awesome. Yeah, we're
so
trying to find more folks. Like we've really kind of put a little bit of time into looking at content creators and people who we think are making really cool stuff, or athletes, things like that, and figuring out how we can partner with them to do like, because again, it's that sort of people angle, and we've done some really interesting things that we partner with folks that have a podcast about board games, and we have
whoa, cool.
a weightlifter that's super cool, and is actually going went to the Olympic trials, which is really cool. So yeah, I mean, it's pretty neat. Like I think that's the thing about a good cup of coffee, is that there's not really any boundaries, for folks who, I think what we've recognized is anybody who likes to dig a little deep, to the deeper cuts of whatever they're into, those type of folks probably might be into the coffee. Because like if you're the type of person who gets really into something, I think coffee is something that's really fun to get really into. You know what I mean? So we're looking for folks
Yeah,
that,
because I'm the
oh,
type
they
of
get really
person that
into
gets really
yeah,
into things, and
yeah, yeah, yeah,
I get it, man.
exactly. Same. Like, and that we can both get really into music. Like, whatever it is that catches my interest, I either get really into or I don't really care about it. So those are the things, and like we're trying to find those sort of adjacent folks who get it really into stuff and say, well, what about coffee? It's fun. There's like gear aspect. There's like coffees. There's brands. There's places. There's flavors. There's all kinds of fun. Then you can get into all the more like nuance of where the coffee's from and that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of like kind of layers to peel back of how interesting it is.
Yeah, there's a lot of layers with coffee, and I definitely am at a point that I've been so into it for so long. I recognize when I need it and or don't have it.
Yeah,
So it's like it
that's right.
becomes a central role in a lot of people's lives. Hey, it makes sense to partner with a board game podcast, staying up late, long hours of playing arduous games like terraforming Mars or whatever it may be. Like
Yeah, it's really cool.
makes total
And I
sense.
get to meet people like that I would just didn't like. It's so cool to get to have a meeting with them and see what they're up to, and like see their they do their podcast, but then it's also on YouTube. So I watched a couple of their previous episodes, and I was like, this is super cool. I don't even know about this stuff. So I've played some board games, but I'm a little bit more old school. I'm like Clue and
Yeah, sure.
yeah, yeah. But it was
Yeah,
really neat to
there's a million like avenues of exploration when it comes to getting really into stuff now, and it's like it's so easy to do so. Whether it's board games, Magic the Gathering, getting really into music, Bandcamp, things like Bandcamp make it so easy
yeah,
because they're almost social in such a way where you buy a record, uh, Tuba Skinny or someone in the jazz world, and you're suggested like so many other options.
right.
And I think in the modern world, it's really a lot easier to get into things than I can remember being handed things like NoFX's Punk and Drublick in a
Yeah,
cassette form from the one guy in my area that probably knew about that kind of music, right?
yeah.
Growing up in the country in Pennsylvania, so it's a lot different of a world when it comes to the ease of getting into something.
That's right. I mean, I remember going to like a bookstore and going and getting, I think it was like Rolling Stones 100 albums of all time, and then they rated those albums, and then they had like a, if you like this record, here are deeper cuts. And I was like taking notes and like sitting down at the, and then having to go and like try to figure out how can I hear these albums. I was like, how can I hear Gang of Four, or how can I hear, you know what I mean, Mission of Burma or something like that. Like, I like it's just it really like, so it's very similar. I guess I'm one of those people that really likes to kind of dig in and go down the rabbit hole, and that's what happened with music, and then happened for sure with coffee as well.
Same for me. We have all these parallels, man, with like, running, then music, then running
Yeah,
again, and still music, you know.
yeah.
Uh, uh,
Except for I run like a mile or two, and you run like you run a lot.
yeah, I run a lot. I run a lot. I run really far, It's no
Yeah,
secret that I run really far. It's
it's
called the
really
ultra.
cool because I'll go out and do things in Savannah with my family, and we'll start off the day going places, and like we'll drive down the road, and I'll be like, oh, there's Pat, and then like we'll go have lunch, and we'll go do something, and then we'll run errands, and we'll drive back. I'm like, oh, there's Pat again.
Yeah,
And
right.
so my family
Like I'm
just
still out
like,
there. I'm still.
I'm always, they're like, why are you like okay, it's Pat, I see. And I'm like, every time I see you, I'm like, there he is over there. So it's pretty fun. It's
Uh,
awesome.
yeah, we've been doing this for about a decade now, man. So it's pretty common territory. So, in
Yeah.
terms of cool things that PERC has coming up and where people can find you, just in terms of the shops, I'm sure we're going to do this again, Philip. But I want to kind of before we wrap up with a few like really fun, quirky questions about you outside of coffee. Um,
Yeah.
where can people like how can people visit PERC if you're in the Atlanta area versus if you're in the Savannah area? They are quite different in
Right.
terms of what you guys do at the given shops. What if people are in Savannah? Like, how can they come over and visit PERC? When do you have like tastings? When do you have special events and that sort of thing?
Right. Yeah. So we are open every day from 7 to 4 currently in Savannah, and everywhere else 7 to 6, I believe. And then in Savannah, we do public cupping, free public cupping the first Saturday of every month. So that's a really fun time. The Savannah shop is a little bit different, obviously, because it's attached to the roastery, and we really want to invite folks in, and if they want to come check out what's happening in the roastery, they can. This weekend too, it'll be posted late, but we're having a bazaar where we're doing vintage clothes and things like that.
So
So it's
cool.
really fun. Yeah, the vintage bazaar. So, but in Atlanta, we have a shop in Eastlake, and then we have a shop in Virginia Highlands, and then we are actually actively opening up 2 shops right now. So we have one that we're going to be opening up probably in about a month in Grant Park, which is super cool. And then we have another one we're
Very
opening
cool.
up just outside of Atlanta in Tucker, which I grew up in Atlanta. So it's really interesting. I think if you had told me when I was in high school that I was going to own a coffee shop in Tucker, I would have been like, what? Because, you
Tucker.
know, yeah, yeah. Well, in 1993, when I was in high school, Tucker was just a little bit outside of my normal stomping ground. So I would have probably been like, I don't know, maybe Little Five Points in Virginia Highlands. That would have made more sense. But
Sure.
anyway, so it's really cool, and we're really excited about it. And I think that one of the things we're trying to do is, as we grow, we're trying to keep it is authentic to the initial inspiration of PERC as we grow. Like the last thing I want to do is have it, we're trying to still make it about people and still make it about great coffee. And in fact, we're trying to do as best we can as we get bigger and bigger to sort of double down on our quality of coffee, and then also trying to figure out how we can do a good job of attracting awesome folks to work for us, and to make awesome things happen. Because I understand that, like, when you go into a coffee shop, if I think really everything hinges on your experience with the folks that are behind the counter. And if they're not treated right, and if you're not helping them out to understand what they need to know, and all the things that it takes, then it's a bit of a dance that can be hard. But
Yeah.
we try really hard, and I'm really lucky to be partnered with Amber Foreman, who's our retail director, and we work really closely together to like figure out how we can hire great people and train them, and then also we have something I'm really proud of. So I'm going to have to talk about it. Is we also do a
Yeah,
management
let's keep
training
this going,
program.
man. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, sorry. Well, we also do a management training program, and this is something that I'm kind of passionate about because I said before I was around the longest, so they were just like your manager now, and I was given very little training, and then at some point they realized how much I didn't know, and they brought in someone to teach the managers more about cost of goods and labor costs and understanding like exactly what you're doing as far as trying to run a successful business. It's important that you run a successful business because if you're not, you're going to go out of business. But also, if you want to do things like evaluate how much you can pay someone, and you want to try to give them more money, but you also can't run out of money, like you need to know your numbers. You need to understand your business. And I've been lucky enough to
Definitely.
partner with someone, Alan, who Alan Fisher, who's also was an ultra runner until he hurt his foot, and now is a cyclist. But he is great with data, and so I've been really lucky. It's really just a lot about forming relationships, and trying to especially find people that are good at things that I'm not good at, and like let them do their thing. I'm not a huge micromanager, so I'm good with just doing my bit.
Yeah,
Sorry, I went on and on.
oh no, that's good, man. That's the nice thing about getting a chance to like partner with so many great people in the industry. And like, as a business owner, you have to wear a lot of hats. But
Yeah.
it's really nice when you have such a big supporting cast of people around you that can help you to just navigate like tricky waters when it comes to, hey, I'd really like to have a great team. Can you teach these managers what it comes down to when we're talking about like um, you know, I don't want you to cut corners. I want you to think about and know like the individual lid, how much each of them cost, the product wasted, how much that costs, right? And it is effective, having worked in places where you're just kind of thrown a stack of, hey, I want you to figure this out. Here's the job title, but you're going to have to figure out how to make it work. It's really nice that you have that type of like you want to see growth. You want to see growth of your employees, and you want to build a community in that way.
Yeah, and if that's one of the reasons why I feel like at least at the beginning I was able to start PERC, because I had some of those basics and felt okay. Well, I know if I can keep my costs low and my rent's not a lot, and like I do most of the work myself, I think I can get the business started. And that a lot of that came from that second training that I had, and I think that that's something that I wanted to try to give back to those folks as well. So it's I mean, I'm just lucky that we have amazing folks that work with us. So it's been awesome.
Man, it's been really cool to do such a awesome deep dive in general on PERC, and we're definitely going to finish up with where people can find you on social media. But I want to do this quick little lightning round of questions that I think both you and me will dig in terms
Okay,
of
let's do it.
different records, et cetera, et cetera. So we've talked about your favorite record before. I think I know what it is, but what's your favorite jazz record and what's your favorite punk record?
Ooh, favorite jazz record is I'm gonna say Eric Dolphy Out to Lunch. That record is just fantastic. I
Uh,
love it so much.
It's so good.
I have
I think I could close my eyes and pull it out of the stack back here, man. Like
yeah.
where it's at, this placement.
I just love that record so much, and the drumming Tony Williams does is just so different, and I just yeah, it's one that's been an inspiration for me for sure. I've been getting into a little bit more of that like kind of earlier sort of some of the earlier guitar jazz. I think maybe because I'm getting old. I don't know
Mm.
what's going on, so I've been listening to Grant Green. What's the one? I can't remember the album. His big one. Jeez, my brain just went out the door. But yeah, no. But Eric Dolphy Out to Lunch is my all time favorite.
Awesome. Favorite punk record and or pop punk or anywhere in the
Yeah.
genre.
No, I think the one I listen to the most and I probably can't get past is probably London Calling by the Clash.
Oh
That's
man, so good.
just I don't know if I'd call it. I guess yeah. If you're including punk and pop punk, it's interesting, but I think that's probably the one. I love the Clash and it's just so dang good.
I've been stuck on the Clash for, virtually 20 years now, man. And everything Joe Strummer's done, especially Joe Strummer and the Mescalaros, that stuff, like his reboot was incredible. I don't know how much of it
Yeah.
you've listened to, but
I'm gonna go check out more of it now. But now that you say that, because I'm a big fan, and I now I've got something to go take a look at. That's awesome, and it's
yeah.
so easy to listen to music nowadays. I kind of am a little bit like sometimes you get a little bit like I had to
I may
do
have
this
lost
to
you now.
listen because folks just they have everything they can listen to anything they want pretty much anytime. That's great.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting to like have a collection but also have access to endless music on streaming services, and I try to spend most of my time with the collection, whether it's like
Yep.
Bandcamp or the records, tapes, etc. There's
Well, and
something
yeah,
special
I
about sitting
use
with an LP, and looking at the
totally.
art and flipping it, and having your hands on the vinyl. I know
Yeah,
Josh feels the same way from Green Truck.
I use the streaming services just to like try things out, and when I decide, oh yeah, then I go and I buy it. Like I like to
Yeah,
have the record as well. I think it's so nice, but I'm not as big on the like listening to just streaming. I don't know why. Probably because I'm old.
I agree. I'm the same way, man. There's something about touching the record and supporting the band. In
Yeah,
that way, where you buy a
right.
physical product. Uh, do you have a favorite live show or a few favorite live shows that you've been to?
Ooh, this is a good question. I've been to a lot of really good shows. So let me just say a couple. Uh, Probably one of the best shows I've been to, just because I wasn't expecting it, was a band called Spiritualized. They put out a record called
Mm.
Pure Phase in the early 90s, 94, 5, 6, something like that. And I went to see them. I think it was at the Masquerade in Atlanta back when
Oh
that
yeah,
was in existence. And it was just I knew I liked the record, but I just didn't know how like intense the live show was going to be, and I was shocked. My mouth was open the whole time. It was so good. So that was one, especially as far as a bigger show. But the other end of things is I lived in a house where we had house shows, and my band
oh
would
yeah.
play a lot of those house shows. But there was in particular a show where Neutral Milk Hotel played in my house,
Oh
and
man,
like I stumbled out of my bedroom to see them play in a house where the whole it just felt like the house was going to come apart. There was so much energy,
wow,
and there were
that's
so
so
many
cool.
people, and they were freaking out. And like, it was kind of before they put out that second record that got really big, but they were working on it, and they were so good live. And one thing that was cool about Neutral Milk live is that it was way more punk rock. Like it was like
Interesting. Yeah,
things thing he played with an energy like that like generally they'd have to stop the show at least once because he would break an instrument, but not because he was breaking it, but because he was just so intense that he would just break the guitar or break he just had that amount of emotion. It was pretty raw, and like it was something to behold, especially in just a house like it. He was too big for the house for sure. It was
so
awesome.
cool, so cool.
Yeah,
Wow, right in your house too, man.
yeah,
That album's enormous
yeah.
in terms of the amount of emotional space it takes up. In the airplane under the sea, right? It's
That's
just
right.
like
Yeah,
such an
I didn't
incredible
even.
record.
It was pre that, and it was
Wow.
so yeah. The guy I live with Phil, he managed the college radio station, and he was like, "Yeah, this band's coming, and they're really good, and they're from they're from out of town." And I think maybe at that same show, I think Olivia Tremor Control played too. It was, you know, I got really lucky to be in the right place at the right time with a lot of those sort of Athens Elephant Six bands, and Elf Power and those guys, and Montreal, and all those bands were. That was my sort of time in Athens, where they were in my house and at the tiny little shows, and it was a blast. Yeah.
Okay, my favorite PERC coffee drink, maybe of all time, was the espresso tonic.
Oh,
But
nice.
in current times, probably the wild cold brew. Do you have a favorite coffee drink? Do you have something that is your go-to?
Huh. That's a good question. A go-to coffee drink. Well, right now I've been really digging the It's Been a Summer. I think that's a really, really awesome drink. And then strangely enough, the Rootin' Scootin' Boogie, or what it's Root Scootin' Boogie, is a root beer drink that is actually really good. And I think that the main reason I really like that one is because uh, when Addison kind of explained the drink to me, I was like, "There's no way this is good." And then it was really good. So,
Yeah,
so I think that I was sort of shocked. But most of the time, I'm just drinking just straight black coffee, and
sure.
I like to just make sure that I'm drinking it through different devices, like just regular coffee pots, or a lot of at the shop tasting coffee. So most of the time, I'm pretty coffeeed out when it comes to having just like a beverage to enjoy coffee. So I do drink a lot of morning coffee that I do drink on the porch and really enjoy, but it's generally just black coffee. So
Checks out,
yeah,
man. Checks out.
yeah,
Okay, good. We had our little lightning round. It was really cool to do this deep dive on PERC and hear a lot about the company and the growth. Yeah, I'm super thankful for all the support and the chance that our paths have crossed, and it's been awesome to have that experience. Seeing Savannah grow so much together, man. So it's
yeah,
been really fun. Where can
yeah.
people find out more about you in terms of your web store? In terms of your social media platforms, if you want to plug them here, we're also going to put them down in the show notes for everybody in post. But tell us about where people can find PERC.
Yeah, it's just percoffee.com. So check us out. I think there's links at the bottom of the site to the socials. Uh, Probably Perk Coffee. Something at Perk Coffee. I don't know how to. If you'll put them at the bottom, that would be helpful. I'm a little less savvy when it comes to socials.
Perfect. We'll definitely tag
We
them
are doing a
in
podcast
post.
though, the Perkcast, which is kind of fun. This is so you can, if you really like to hear me talk and talk, it's a pretty good place to do that.
Cool. We're gonna link all three of those, Philip. We're gonna tell people, in the comments below, and the show notes, just in general, where they can find you. And so, thanks so much for taking the time today to come on the cast, and I enjoyed our conversation.
Thanks for having me. It's awesome. And it's been awesome to see you all these years do amazing things. And when I do go on socials, I'm seeing you like win or come in second or third on amazing races all over the place. And I'm always really excited to let people know that, like, I know that guy. So it's really cool.
Well, thanks, man. It's been a fun journey, and yeah, we got a lot of miles ahead of us still, right? So,
Heck yeah.
all right, thanks, buddy.
Okay. See you.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Philip Brown from Perk Coffee as much as I did. If you happen to be in the Savannah or Atlanta region, be sure to check out their retail locations. They have one shop here in Savannah and multiple locations up in Atlanta now. If you'd like to access their website at perkcoffee.com, you're welcome to use my 10% discount code there. It's just Patrick Reagan Running, all one word. Thanks so much for joining me for this episode of the Ultrawizard Ramble, and I'll see you next time.